The mud was still frozen at the edges when she buried him. Wren's fingers. No, not Wren. That name was already in the file. Sable was taken too. Let me start again properly. Her hands were already bleeding by the time she reached the birch grove. She did not know when the cold had stopped hurting. Somewhere between the ridge and the frozen creek, her fingers had gone past pain into something quieter, something that did not ask anything of her. She was grateful for that. She did not have much left to give. The bundle against her chest was wrapped in the grey wool she had been saving. She had been saving it for a long time, since before her belly had grown large enough that she could not button her coat. She had washed the wool twice and set it on the windowsill to dry in the autumn light, and she had thought, "This will be warm enough. This will be enough." It was not enough. She found the hollow in the oldest birch, the one split down the middle by a storm 3 winters back. She had played near it as a child. She remembered thinking the crack looked like a mouth, like the tree was trying to say something it could not quite form. She had pressed her ear against the bark once, very seriously, the way children do, and listened. She pressed her ear against it now. There was nothing. There had never been anything. But she stayed there a moment with her forehead against the cold white bark and breathed until her ribs stopped shaking. Then she set him inside. She did not look again after that. She could not. She arranged the wool as carefully as her hands would allow, tucked it at the corners, smoothed it flat, and then she stepped back and she looked at the sky instead, which was white and empty and did not require anything of her either. Her name was Evelyn. She was 23 years old, and she walked back to the pack's territory alone, in the dark, with her arms empty and her wolf so silent inside her that she pressed a hand to her own sternum just to feel her heartbeat and make sure the wolf was still there at all. She was, barely. The pack did not ask questions, exactly, but they asked things around the questions, the way you reach around a fire to grab something on the other side without saying, "You know the fire is there." "You look tired, Evelyn. You should eat something, Evelyn. We heard you were unwell." The Gamma's wife brought her a pot of soup she did not ask for and left it at her door without knocking, and Evelyn sat on the floor of her cabin and stared at it until it went cold. She had not told anyone about the pup, not the circumstances, not the father, not what she had done after. She told them only that she had lost the pregnancy, which was true, and she told them she was healing, which was also technically true, in the way that scar tissue is a form of healing, even when it makes the skin stiff and strange and nothing moves the way it used to. What she did not say was that she had held him for 4 hours before she could put him down. What she did not say was his name, which she had whispered into the wool before she tucked it around him, a name no one else would ever use, a name that had been hers to give and hers alone since the moment she first felt him turn inside her. What she did not say was that she went back. Every full moon, when the pack ran together and the territory filled with the sound of paws on frozen ground, she slipped away from the group and walked to the birch grove and sat with her back against the splitter tree and stayed until the moon moved past the highest point and began its slow fall toward the ridge. She brought nothing, she said nothing, she just sat. The pack thought she was strange. She heard the whispers the way you hear wind through a gap in a wall, not loud enough to make out every word, but present enough to feel the cold of it. Evelyn lost herself when she lost the pup. Evelyn won't run with us anymore. Evelyn has gone quiet in a way that doesn't come back. She let them say it. She had nothing to spend on correcting them. The alpha arrived in the 3rd month of the 2nd year, though she would not know who he was until much later. He came without the usual escort, without announcement, without the particular kind of entrance that alphas tend to make when they want you to know exactly what they are. He came alone in the early evening when the light was going orange through the trees, and he sat at the far end of the common table in the pack hall, and he ate what the cook put in front of him, and he watched. Evelyn noticed him the way you notice a splinter, something small and slightly wrong, something lodged just under the skin. She noticed that he did not speak unless spoken to. She noticed that he listened the way most people forgot you could, not waiting for his own turn, but actually taking in what was said, turning it over, setting it somewhere. She noticed that his hands were very still when he was at rest, which was unusual in men who carried the kind of weight she could feel coming off him in low, steady waves. She ate her dinner and did not speak to him. He did not speak to her. This continued for 11 days. On the 12th day, he sat down across from her at the small table by the window, where she took her breakfast alone every morning, and he set a book between them. Not pushed toward her, not offered with a hand, just set in the neutral space between the two plates as if it had always been there. And he said, without preamble, "The second chapter is the part worth reading. The rest earns it." He got up and left before she could respond. She stared at the book for a long time. Then she picked it up. She read the second chapter that night by the light of the wood stove, and then she read the rest of it. Because he had been right that the second chapter earned the rest, and then she lay on her back in the dark and thought about what it meant that a stranger had handed her the one thing she had not known she was missing. She had stopped reading when the pup died. She had not noticed she had stopped. You do not notice the absence of things that once felt optional. You only notice the weight they leave behind, and even then only sideways, in the moment before sleep when the mind drops its guard and lets things in that you have been keeping out. She went to breakfast the next morning. He was there. He had a different book. He did not look up. She sat down. She slid her finished book across the table to him. She said, "The third chapter is better than the second." He looked up. Something shifted in his face, not a smile exactly, but the space where a smile might sit if he let it. He picked up the book. He did not say anything else. She realized she did not know his name. "Breck," the Pax Beta told her when she asked, with the tone of a man who thought the question itself was strange. "His name is Varek." "He is." The Beta paused and seemed to reconsider something. "He is here on behalf of the Northern Territories. Observing. Observing what? The Pack. How we run. How we manage border disputes." The Beta's eyes went careful. "Why do you ask, Evelyn?" "He lent me a book," she said. The Beta looked at her for a long moment. "He doesn't usually talk to people." "He didn't really talk to me either," she said. "He just left a book." She went home and thought about that. She thought about the fact that he had chosen her specifically, had sat down at her table, which was the table no one else sat at, the table everyone had learned without being told was hers alone. She thought about what it took to notice a person who had made themselves deliberately difficult to see. She thought about it too much, probably. She went back to the hall the next morning anyway. The books became a rhythm. He would leave one. She would read it. She would say one thing about it. He would say one thing back. They would eat breakfast in silence and then go separately to their separate days. She did not know what she was doing, exactly. She knew only that for the first time in almost 2 years, she had started looking forward to something which frightened her in a quiet way that she did not examine too closely. He never asked about the pup. He never asked why she ate alone, or why she did not run with the pack on full moons, or why she suspected he had noticed. There were mornings she came to breakfast with cold mud still on her boots. He never asked. She did not know if that was kindness or something else. It was not until the 4th week that he said her name. She had said something about the ending of a story. She had said she found it dishonest, that the character had survived something that ought to have changed her, and the author had simply written her unchanged, bright and intact on the other side of something that did not leave people bright and intact. He was quiet for a moment, then he said, "Evelyn." She looked at him. "What do you think it looks like?" he said. "When something changes a person honestly." She was not expecting the question. She looked down at her hands on the table. She had gone back to wearing her sleeves long, always, even in the warmth of the hall, so the scars along her wrists where the branches had caught her that night did not show. "Quieter," she said finally. "The honest version is quieter. You don't recognize yourself from the outside anymore. You recognize yourself only from the inside, and even that feels strange sometimes." He nodded slowly. "That's what I thought," he said. "I just wanted to hear you say it." She did not know what to do with that. She went home and sat by the wood stove for a long time. The moon came around again. She waited until the pack had gone, until the sound of them in the woods had faded north and east, and then she took the path south toward the birch grove. She had her coat buttoned to the throat. The snow was light this month, barely enough to leave tracks, and the ground under it was hard with cold that had not let go since October. She did not hear him following her. She did not know until she settled back against the split birch and looked up at the moon through the bare branches that there was someone else in the grove. She turned. Varek stood at the tree line. He was not close. He had not come close, had stopped maybe 20 feet back near the edge of the light, as if he had understood without being told that this was a place you did not enter without permission. They looked at each other. She thought she should feel something like violation, like the ruin of the only private thing she had kept. She waited for the feeling. It did not come. What came instead was something she did not have a name for. The strange and unexpected relief of being seen in a place she had thought no one would ever find her. She turned back to the tree. "His name was Emrin," she said. Her voice came out steady. She had not planned to say it. She had not planned to say anything. But the name had been sitting in her chest for 2 years, and sometimes things that have been held that long simply release. "He didn't survive the birth," she said. "I didn't tell anyone what I did after. I don't think I could have explained it in a way that made sense." She heard Varek's steps in the snow. Slow. Not toward her, to the side, to the base of a birch at the tree line, where he sat down with his back against the bark, far enough to give her space, but close enough that she was not alone. "You don't have to explain it," he said. "I know," she said. "I'm telling you anyway," she told him. "Not all of it, not that night. It came out in pieces over weeks. Some of it at the breakfast table in the hall, some of it on the walk between the hall and her cabin in the dark, some of it in the birch grove when the moon came around again." She told him about the father, who had been the pack's former enforcer, and who had left before she had known about the pup, and who had not, when she'd found him and told him, chosen to come back. She told him about the night of the birth, the cold, the silence that had fallen over her wolf the moment she understood what was happening, and that there was nothing she could do. She told him about the 4 hours she had sat in the dirt floor of her cabin with Emrin in her arms, because she had not been ready to put him down, and she had refused to be rushed by anything, not even grief. She told him about the name. "I chose it before he was born," she said. "I heard it somewhere, years ago, and I held on to it. When he was gone, it felt important that he still had it, that it still existed somewhere." She paused. "It exists in me, I suppose, and in that tree." Varek was quiet for a long time after that. "It exists here now," he said, "in whoever else has heard it." She looked at him. She thought she had forgotten how to let people in. She thought the door had closed the night she walked back from the birch grove alone, and that there was no mechanism left by which it could be reopened. She had thought the damage was of that particular kind. She was not sure now. He told her, much later, that he had known from the 3rd day. "Known what?" she said. "That you were the reason I was here," he said. Not dramatic, just factual, the way he said most things, as if the fact itself was enough and didn't need decorating. "That doesn't make any sense," she said. "You came on behalf of the Northern Territories." "I did," he said. "That part is also true." She looked at him. "How long have you known what you were to me?" "Since I sat down at your table," he said. "The bond is quiet until it isn't, and then it becomes the loudest thing in the room." "Why didn't you say anything?" He looked at her steadily. "Because knowing what you needed wasn't the same as knowing if you were ready to hear it, and getting that order wrong seemed like a thing you could not take back." She thought about that for a long time. She thought about the books, about the 2nd chapter, about sitting in the birch grove with the moon overhead and his voice saying, "You don't have to explain it from the dark at the tree line. You were waiting, she said. I was here, he said. There's a difference. She did not accept the bond immediately. She thought that was important to say honestly. She did not fall into it the way stories sometimes suggest people fall into things cleanly and all at once. She sat with it. She was afraid of it in ways she could name and ways she could not. She was afraid of wanting something again. She was afraid of what it meant to let someone into the space that had been Emryn's, because she did not want the living to crowd out the dead, did not want the fact of future happiness to function as a kind of forgetting. She told Varric this. He said, "It won't," she said. "How do you know?" He said, "Because you won't let it. That's not who you are." She looked at the fire in the wood stove, the way the light moved on the floor, and she thought about the 2 years she had carried Emryn's name inside her, had carried it carefully and continuously, had brought it every month to the birch grove, and said nothing but stayed. She thought about what it meant that she had never once stopped going back. "He'll always be yours," Varric said. "That doesn't change because you let something else be true at the same time," she said. "I need you to understand that I will always go back to that tree." "I know," he said. "I'm not asking your permission," she said. "I know," he said again. "I'll go with you if you want, or I'll stay here, whichever is right." She breathed out slowly. "Come," she said. "Next month." Come. The spring came slowly that year, the frost holding on longer than usual, the birches slow to bud. But they did bud. They always did, eventually. Avlin stood at the base of the split tree in the first real warmth of April, Varric 3 feet to her left, close enough that their arms almost touched. She set her hand against the bark. She thought about Emryn. She thought about the woman who had walked here in the dark, bleeding and silent, with her arms full and then empty. She thought about how that woman had kept getting up in the mornings, had made it to breakfast, had picked up a book a stranger set on the table, had said one true thing out loud in the cold. She thought that woman deserved to know she was still standing. "Hey," she said softly to the tree. Not loud. Varric was close enough to hear, but she did not care. She did not care anymore about the privacy of this. She had decided that the things you keep too private eventually become the things you carry alone until your back goes out, and she was tired of carrying alone. "Hey, little one, I'm still here." She stayed until the light changed. When she stepped back, Varric put his hand at the small of her back, not holding her, not steering, just present, just there. And they walked out of the birch grove together as the sun went behind the ridge, and the sky turned the particular color of pink that she had always thought was the prettiest part of a day that had already mostly ended. She thought about the way they had fallen into this. Not fast, not the way she had thought things like this happened, but slowly, through books and cold mornings, and one careful question at a time, through the long accumulated weight of being truly and quietly known by someone who had sat down at the table no one else sat at, and decided, without fanfare, to stay. That, she thought, was what it actually looked like. The honest version, she recognized herself from the inside, and for the first time in 2 years, that was enough.